This summer, Wisden are proudly sponsored by Kia UK. Kia are leading the way in electrification with their groundbreaking range of EVs, including the EV9, EV6, and the UK Car of the Year, the EV3. Kia also have a commitment to movement that inspires and want to help cricket fans get closer to the action. Listen every week for Kia's Movement That Inspires moment for chances to win exciting experiences at the Kia Oval this summer. Hello and welcome to the Wisden Cricket Weekly podcast. We're just a few hours away from the fourth test in the Jimmy Sachin series, and with less than a day to go, we are still none the wiser as to what the India team will actually be. We'll also be talking about a potentially seismic change to the test game that might be coming our way in less than 2 years' time. And it turns out that county pros are just like the rest of us. They want to work less for the same money. We'll be talking about potential changes to the county championship structure for 2026 and beyond. I'm Rana, and with me today is Ben Gardner. But first, here's Mark Butcher on the India team and why deep down he actually loves a good old sledge. We're recording this one day out of the Old Trafford test match. We know what the England team is. Liam Dawson is in, but for once, we are not going to talk about him on the weekly show. I think we've done enough of that recently. India side, less straightforward to work out. Nitish Kumar Reddy has been ruled out of the series. It looks like Sai Sudarshan, who started the series at 3, is going to come in at 6. And in the bowling department, there's a bit of doubt over Akash Deep's fitness, and it's potentially going to give a debut to a young guy called Anshul Kamboj, who's yet to play a test match, got an excellent first-class record, did well against the England Lions. Butch, more generally, one, what will India lose in not having Nitish Kumar Reddy, an all-rounder, being replaced by a specialist bat in Sai Sudarshan? And two, England get a bit of criticism for being too loyal to individuals. And India have gone the other way. They're quite England in the 90s in terms of it doesn't take a long time for them to completely reverse their view on an individual. In some cases, completely change their mind after one test match. What sort of impact can that have on a dressing room and individuals within it?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, obviously, when you're on tour, you're restricted in terms of the personnel you have. I think they had an 18-man squad at the beginning of it, so they had a few more options up their sleeve than perhaps traditionally touring teams might have. You might have 15 or 16 was sort of the number before. And of course, if you end up with injuries, particularly to key bowlers, then that sort of throws your plans out of the window. So Nitish Kumar Reddy kind of did an excellent job for them, extending the batting lineup and also giving them a bit of a safety valve as a seam bowler on what were very flat pitches at Edgbaston and at Lords, so that they had that extra ballast to take a little bit of the heat away from Akash and Bumrah. So they're changing the entire balance of the team, aren't they, really, by adding an extra batter in, plus the seam bowling all-rounder. So I wouldn't say that they're chopping and changing or being sort of disloyal to players or turning or ripping up the entire plan. I think they're just acting in a way that is pragmatic given the injury problems that they've got. However, it can be a bit of a nightmare, having gone through all of that in the 90s or the back end of the 90s, where players were literally, you just didn't know whether you were going to be playing from one test match to the other. That doesn't help sort of mentality in terms of, at least in terms of looking at the bigger picture and playing for the team or playing for the cause. You ended up sort of looking inwards and trying to preserve yourself, as opposed to sort of looking at the overall goal of what the team was trying to do or the series or whatever else. But I don't think they're quite there. I think that it's, the last time that they sort of ripped it all up and started again, they won at Edgbaston as well. So, we were all having a good laugh and joke about that team selection, but it turned out quite well for them. So I simply think that they're doing what they have to do in order to mitigate the injury problems that they've got.
Yeah. On having a specialist batter at number 6, historically that's viewed as the plush role for a new guy in the team. You start them at 6 and slowly they go up the order. But can 6 actually be quite a difficult place to bat as a specialist batter who's used to batting in the top 4 in domestic cricket? Because if you go back to early in the series, Naya when he batted six in the first test, for example, he struggled to find like the tempo of an actual number six, where quite often you're given an amazing platform on paper, but what the team asks of you is not necessarily someone to construct an innings in a more classical sense.
Yeah, you're entirely sort of beholden to match situations. But then again, batting at number three, I think you're in that position a little bit too, But I guess the difficulty for him is potentially the fact that he's a top order batter through and through. Does he have the tools to sort of come in maybe against a softball, against spin with, ring fields and all that type of stuff? So there's a difficulty in that. I think from a personal point of view, or from my only experience of batting at six in a test match, which was in Port of Spain in 1998, it was the cushiest job in the world. Absolutely loved it. You come off the field, you might have been in the field for 130 overs, you go and put your feet up for hours, and come out against a softer ball with the field back. So that the thing that I said might be a difficulty was actually was fine. It was a hell of a lot easier than opening the batting back in those days against Walsh and Ambrose. So, I reckon that he'll be fine. I guess the interesting thing is that with him back in the team, that they didn't put him back at three and put Naya back at six, which is obviously where they started. But they're trying to give Naya a bit of a run. He's looked decent at times. Gets a bit stuck on the crease against the bouncing ball, which has been a bit of an issue for him. But I think the two of them are kind of eventually, when India get back home and sort of have more resources at their disposal and can play teams that are a little bit more sort of spin reliant, perhaps, that they might find themselves going back to Siddharthan at three anyway. So. But we'll see. At the moment, they're just trying to patch up all of the injury problems they got while still fielding what looks like a pretty good team. It's a lot of batting for England to get through if the pitch is flat again.
Were you definitely afforded the luxury of 2 hours with your feet up when you were batting at six? Was it as long as 2 hours?
It was a bit longer than that, actually. I mean, those games, we played two back-to-back test matches in Port of Spain on that tour because of the abandoned match at Jamaica. And I think it was the second one that I played in. I didn't play in the first one. I played in the second after my first ball duck at Jamaica in the abandoned game. And the pitches were very much sort of like a little bit like sort of Lords on the first 3 days. Very, very slow and low. Maybe they seemed a little bit more, but everything took a very long time in those games. They went right to the wire on day 5. So I did put my feet up for a bit.
One of my favourite things about 5-match test series is the storylines that emerge in the quiet week where there's not a game in the middle. And one of the storylines the last week is that England are no longer nice. They've been talking a lot about not being the nice guys anymore. They had a conversation on the 4th evening about perhaps they've been too nice in the past, and they're talking about it again. It's not on them. They're being asked. The only thing they're being asked at the moment is are you guys nice? And Harry, yesterday speaking to the media, said they're essentially embracing no longer being the nice guys anymore. They've had a mental skills coach from New Zealand who worked with the New Zealand rugby team come in. He gave the team a speech yesterday. He's worked with Chelsea Football Club as well as a whole host of other sports.
World Club champions, no less.
Exactly. You can't ask for much more than that. I'm trying to understand what does this mean? Does this mean anything, or is this just talk in between tests because we need to talk about something?
It's brilliant, isn't it? We've become very much unused to the void with a week between tests. It's just been back-to-back tests all of the time for as long as I can remember. And so you do get this sort of anticipation and the silliness that comes in between with the lack of real stories or the lack of cricket to write about it. And it's great. I think it's fantastic. Listen, England in that last test match reacted to India, really. And I'm not saying it's India's fault. I'm not putting any blame on them at all, but they reacted in a way that kind of brought them all together as a side. And sort of increased the sort of the bond that they have behind their captain playing for England and all that kind of stuff. And you heard guys talking about sort of, with almost nationalistic pride about you're out there playing for your country. And those are things I've never heard people like Joe Root say before. And so, good. I think it's great. It's great. It all adds to the theatre of the series. And also it's listen, I played under a captain in Adam Hollyoake at Surrey, who was kind of the tastiest bloke on, he turned out to be a cage fighter and a boxer. And we all knew that Smokey loved his pugilism. And when you're behind a leader like that, who is basically the hardest bloke on the field, it kind of, it gives everybody a little bit of a G up to kind of push their own boundaries a bit, because that you've got the daddy on your team. And with Ben Stokes, England have got that too. So, I'm all for it if it kind of brings Zach Crawley out of himself a little bit, and perhaps gives him a little bit of extra dog. And if it makes Harry Brooks sort of think twice about doing something completely ridiculous in the middle, and thinks about sort of how this is going to how we can make life more difficult for the opposition, I think I'm all for it. The interesting thing, I suppose, is that Baz McCullum, his sort of mantra was always very much, we play the game fair and we're good guys and all this kind of stuff. And that seems to have gone completely out the window as well, after you saw his instruction for the team to get into Washington Sundar when he came out. So listen, the gloves are off. The series it's serious. And I think one of the things about Bazball that has frustrated people, the general public, the cricket watching public, has been this sense that that winning games isn't as important as sort of like the way that you play or the style or all the rest of it. And I think people are now getting the idea that England actually this really, really does matter. And if it takes a bit of sledging and a little bit of skullduggery from here and there, I think most people are all for it. Yeah. So it's all good.
One of the most striking aspects of the Harry Brooks press conference yesterday was the relish with which he was talking about doing it, because it's clearly not something he's done loads of as an international player, and sort of being given the green light to do it. He clearly really enjoyed it.
I mean, to be honest, mate, it's a lot of fun. I've played in series over the years which were unbelievably nasty, very unpleasant. And that was a slightly different thing. This is a little bit more like, okay, well, if we can get under people's skin and we've got a bit of a license to go at the odd player, fine. And all of that, I think, adds to the drama of it. And we might get to Old Trafford and nothing comes up, and basically the whole thing gets played out as it normally is. But guaranteed, if there is any sort of flashpoint, any sort of feeling that one team is stepping over the line one way or the other, whether it be by wasting time or doing anything else, there's going to be a blow up or at least a few words said. So it's all good.
And finally, on the England team, the same 11 as they put out at Lords, except from the spinner Dawson in for the injured Bashir. Same seam attack, not necessarily what everyone expected. What do you make of that? Especially, I suppose, the retention of Archie playing back-to-back Test matches and Carson Wokes having played 4 out of 4 now.
Well, I mean, again, it's the beauty of having the rest in between, isn't it? You're not having to sort of recycle the attack just in order to get some fresh legs out on the park. It's very much how things used to be. You could, if everyone was fit, you could play your what you think is your best 11, and the way that they performed at Lords absolutely warrants them to go with the same side. I guess the only slight issue is Wokes and his effectiveness, particularly with him not scoring any runs. But the chances are he might be one spot down the order. England back longer now because of Dawson. What a great idea that was. I don't know where that came from. So that perhaps isn't as important as what he does with the new ball, how effective he'll be with the new ball. And interestingly, sort of Old Trafford is your sort of kryptonite type pitch to somebody like Chris Wokes, particularly if it isn't particularly quick. I don't know. It might have a bit more pace. It certainly have more pace in it than Lords. I don't think it will be quite as zippy as Old Trafford. But if it does, then and Wokes bowls as well as he did at times at Lords in terms of line and length, and he could be very effective with that new ball. And let's not forget that will be his job. He won't really come into the attack, much like Matthew Hoggard did in the Four Horsemen 2005 lineup. That his job will be new ball, first new ball, second new ball, maybe a few overs in between, but not much else. So it'd be interesting to see how he goes with that. Can we just go back to the sledging thing?
Yes, please do.
Yes, please do. One of the things that I always get asked, and all professional cricketers get asked about sort of sledging and all that kind of stuff. And I guarantee you that in the professional game, there is less sledging than there is at the weekend on Saturday. The idea that because I know people are going to get upset with me for sort of going up, relishing it and thinking it's all good fun and great. It's not setting a great example to the kids. I have watched enough club cricket on Saturdays with my friends playing to know that there is more sledging that goes on there because they think that that's what goes on in the professional game than there ever is or ever was in the professional game that I actually played it. So where it comes from, I don't know, but they're not getting it from us. They're an absolute disgrace on a Saturday. And so for once, the professional game is aping the club game.
I think you're right on that. I think it's because anytime there is literally a single sledge these days, it goes viral.
Right.
So I think you get the impression that it happens all the time because everything gets picked up on stunt mic. Whereas, and also, I think there's a lot else going on in people's minds on Saturdays other than sledging. I think there's a lot of anger management.
A lot of pent up. I've been at work all week. Anger that needs to come out. Yeah, but I mean, it's exactly it. And perhaps that's why I think it strikes a chord with people when it happens. And yes, some people abhor it and think it's boorish and unnecessarily and ungentlemanly. But as many people will find it all part of the drama and enjoy the Test match even more, particularly if your team comes out on top with the bragging rights and can go Yarboo sucks to you at the end of it.
Well, all to play for in Manchester. England have the chance to seal the series. It'll be fascinating to see how it plays out. Cheers for your time, Butch. See you next week. For this episode's Kia's Movement That Inspires moment, Kia, proud sponsors of the Kia Oval, are giving you the chance to attend the first day of the England-India Test that starts on July 31st. It's the final test of the English summer, and it'll be one that either makes it a 4-1 England series win or a 3-2 win either way. So lots to play for your chance to win 4 tickets to this highly anticipated first day of the test on July 31st. All you need to do is enter by the link in the description. You're ruling out a draw altogether. It rains a bit in Manchester. That's true, actually. The last time we had a marquee test at Manchester, it did end in a draw because of the rain. And yeah, the forecast isn't looking amazing. Celebrating the India tour of England, the podcast is proudly partnered with Remitly. We all cheer for every cover drive, every Yorker, every run saved, but every cheer from the stands or from our screens thousands of miles away is more than just support for the team. Every cheer is a cheer for home. What's the team that we play for every single day? That's our family. No matter the distance, they're always with us in every moment of pride, joy, and connection. Maybe that's why millions of people choose Remitly to send money to India. With fast, safe, and affordable transfers and great exchange rates with low fees, more of the money you send reaches the people who matter most. Because wherever we are, home is in every cheer. Ready to give Remitly a try? Download the Remitly app today and enjoy a special offer on your first transfer. Ben, we are just hours away from the 4th England-India Test match. We know the England team. Speculation around the makeup of the India team, however, is rife. What are the spots that are up for grabs? Because as we know, India are old school. They don't name their team until the toss. Yeah, as I see it, there's 3 spots that are properly up for grabs and maybe a 4th that could jiggle depending on who they come into 11. They could reshuffle the batting order because of that. So the main thing is that Nishant Kumar Reddy is injured out of the tour, which is a shame because, you know, he made an impact with the ball and he's a hugely talented young all-rounder and he will do lots in the game, but this is a big series that he could have had, I think, quite a big impact on that he now won't. The curious thing is like, he sort of doesn't look like much of an all-rounder, but the fact that he bowls enough seam, India will miss that, and that actually then prompts quite a big reshuffle going forward. So they very, very rarely, we'll get into the exact numbers soon, but they very rarely play without a 4th seamer outside of Asia. And so to get a 4th seamer in either means that you go Jadeja at 6, Sundar at 7, and then Shardul at 8, which is a possibility, or it means that you have to leave out Sundar, who was one of the players of the last Test match. Well, it would be mad in that, you know, you've got a guy who's playing really well,
And part of winning test series is just backing your guys who are in form. Like, you won't have everyone in form in an 11-strong team through a test series, but a couple of guys who are in form can carry you through a game or two. So it would be mad, but then it would also be mad for them based on, on their selection philosophy and on how they've gone about things to go in without a fourth seamer. So that is the dilemma that they have to grapple with.
Question: why do India think they need to have four seamers? Because a lot of the chat this series has been around the Duke's ball not offering seamers as much as usual, with the old ball wanting to get past the 30th over. We've barely seen seamers take wickets this series. So why do they think they need four seamers?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question, and it would be fair to say that there would be a way to go about it where you have especially with the new ball being so devastating, you just have your seamers bowl base with the new ball. Maybe they get a couple of them get a spell each with the old ball, but if you have two very good spinners who are going to keep the rate down, you just plug them in between sort of overs 40 and 80, and then all of a sudden the new balls come around again and you do that. That is a way they could do it. It's just the fact that they've chosen not to. There have been lots of times when they could have chosen a second spinner. You think back to the days when every game when they played in England, it would be, is Ashwin going to play this one?
Well,
no, Ashwin isn't going to play this one.
Going to play.
Exactly, yeah. And so they have found a way to have two spinners in the 11, albeit with them both being all-rounders, because they have a third all-rounder. But that just is the way that they think is best to go. You can question it, but that's the logic, and at least that's been consistent, even if not much else about Indian selection is at the moment.
So if you look back at the last few years, both India overseas, but also England at home, how rare is it that a team only plays three seamers in England?
Well, for England, very rare. So the last time they only had three seamers who bowled the ball in a game was back in the 2013 Ashes. So that was when you had Trott occasionally would fill in for the last few games of that series. Then they had Wokes on the side by the end. So Lord's 2013 was the last time England had three seamers in a game, if you exclude the Ireland Test in 2023 when Stokes in the 11 but didn't bowl. And then if you think back to what happened then, the next summer, Moeen's in for the first test, so that allows them to play. He was batting at 6 then, so that allowed them to play four seamers, and then Stokes in the side by the start of the next summer. And then they have basically never picked a team without four seamers since then.
And it is worth saying that actually when Ben Stokes is injured these days, England replace him by picking Chris Wokes at 7. That
Exactly.
might not happen again given Wokes' age, etc. But that's how they've looked to replace Stokes in the past. England pretty much always have four seamers at home, sometimes even 5. But that's summer in 2021 where they fielded a bowling attack without a spinner for much of the, if not the entire summer.
Yeah, well, because Leach didn't play a game that whole summer and then comes in for the first test at Ashes. Good times. And then India, it's not quite as rare, but it's interesting. I was looking back, I think the World Championship final in 2021, they picked two spinners for that game. That was against New Zealand at Southampton, Ashwin and Jadeja, and then the three seamers, and they lost that game. But I think they view that as sort of like, well, we tried it and it didn't work. I went back and looked at Ashwin's figures in that game. He took 4 for 45 across the two innings. He took two for 17 and two for 28, I think. Was not the reason they lost that game. I think they sort of felt that, well, then why do we have Jadeja in the side, but then we have to pick Jadeja, that there was sort of not almost a reason to have the second spinner, rather than, it's not possible for a spinner to bowl well here, whereas now there might be a bit more reason for a second spinner. And that game also was just it was just a freakish one in terms of the quality of the bowling as well. So you could see why, if we could have a fourth seamer bowling as well as the other three are bowling, then that would be great. So it's weird that seems to have been the turning point, but it does seem like it was. That is the last time that out in South Africa, England, New Zealand, Australia, that they have gone in with that balance of attack with just the three seamers. And maybe this will be the turning point. Old Trafford is known to overspin, although the statistics don't hugely bear that out in Test cricket at least. But I think that this is the other thing why it's such an interesting selection thing, is that it's just been so hard to predict in the selection. There just hasn't been a thread of logic running through it all the time. You think back to the second test, you had Sai Siddharthan coming in to make his test debut, then gets left out. I think it's not impossible that it is, well, it seems more likely than not that it's Siddharthan who places Kumar Reddy rather than going in with the three all-rounders. And if that's the case, you almost wouldn't be surprised if he ends up batting at 6 and Karen Nair at 3 when they started the series switch in the opposite positions, or they switch them back, or it's Dhruv Jarrell who comes in as a specialist batter, or he takes the gloves off Pant. And then they have questions over the third seamer, which are sort of more standard, which are down to, is Akashdeep fit enough to get through a test? If not, do they back Prasidh Krishna again? Or it seems reasonably likely that they go with Anshul Kamboj, who they've just called into the squad. So that again shows that that pecking order isn't very solid at all, and that they will just, go with someone who they like the look of on the eve of a game. And that, sometimes that can work, but so far on the whole, I'd say it's a little bit scattergun from India, and it seems like that might continue for the next game.
Yeah, I do think it's interesting that India are potentially picking a balance of side that would work really well for a previous tour of England in 2021 or going further back in 2018, where Seam played a massive, massive part in that series. Just think back at what we've seen in the first 3 test matches. Washington's spell in the second innings here at Lord's was as effective as anyone has been with the old ball. He rips the heart of that England middle order, and it's not luck. It's properly good, world-class off-spin bowling, deception in the air, turn off the pitch. And Old Trafford has a history of being a pretty good track for spinners. If you look at the most recent county championship game there, I think Calvin Harrison, the leg spinner, takes 11 in the game. But the weather's very different, Ben. For our viewers and listeners who are not in the UK, the weather in the last few days has been completely different to what we've seen this summer so far.
It's been cold. I'm wearing a jumper. Yaz has got a jacket on. That's also because of the air conditioning in here. But the weather has definitely changed. And you even saw in that in the women's ODI here at Lord's actually that the pitch did play a bit differently because of that as well. There's like sort of a bit more juice in it. Just having a pitch that's kind of like sweating under a cover can make it hard to predict. So that's I suppose a reason why you should wait until the morning of a game to name your 11 rather than 2 days out.
And we'll talk about how England ended up with the same seam attack again in a bit. But part of it is if it is a venue that is conducive to seam bowling, if you field 3 and within that 3 there are guys who have injury doubts or concerns about the number of overs they can bowl across a test match, you are suddenly very vulnerable if you only pick 3 and one goes down. So that's another reason. It might not be the most positive way of constructing a side, but that also does make sense. Talk to us about Anshul Kamboj, because he's come from nowhere.
Well, he has come from nowhere, but he's done some things. So he looked pretty good in the Lions tour ahead of the start of this series. But also he's got a first class 10-for, and that's great. I mean, it was back in the Ranji Trophy in the last season on a sort of greenish pitch. There's a highlights clip you can go and watch it, and so it means he's one of these rare cricketers who has an innings best that's better than his match best. So he's not taken more than 10 wickets in the match, but he has got 10 for 49 in an innings. He's not. It's interesting if you think if the decision does come down to him v Krishna, because they are such different types of bowlers. Like Kamboj he's a skills guy. He's not super quick, but he should be able to keep the economy rate down. He should be able to bowl with good control and maybe get something out of the wicket if there's something there. Whereas obviously we know what Krishna offers that is the exact opposite of that, basically, where he is an old ball bowler maybe who could have an impact at times as he did in that first test. But I think that's what you can maybe expect from him. But maybe they've seen something different in the nets as well. I don't know. But I guess the thing is he is a bit of an unknown. That is an exciting thing to come in through a series.
Yeah, and we saw just over a year ago, Akashdeep was in a similar-ish position career-wise, and in his first test match does a really good job. I think he takes the first 3 wickets on debut, or certainly got all of England's top 3. He's got a brilliant first-class record, 79 wickets at 22.88. He's played a bit in the IPL for Mumbai and Chennai, and as you say, he went well against the England Lions a few weeks ago at Canterbury and Northampton. In the second innings of the second game, he picked up Emilio Gay and Jordan Cox very cheaply with the new ball and scored a 50 in that game as well. I've seen some people describe him as an all-rounder. He is not. That 50 was his first in first-class cricket, and his career average is 16. He's not an all-rounder, but if you compare him to Siraj, Bumrah, Krishna, he probably would bat 9 if he plays. Yeah,
he's an all-rounder in the way that Harshit Rana's an all-rounder, in that maybe he could be a like-for-like for Shivam Dubey if situation required. Yeah.
Ben, Gus Atkinson is not playing at Old Trafford. He's had to get a bit creative in finding game time elsewhere.
Yes, well, in 2 senses. I mean, we had good fun following along when he was playing for Spencer CC in the Surrey Championship in club cricket on the Saturday of the last test match. So, and this is friend of the pod, Cameron Ponsonby's club. And so he was going around the press box very excited on Friday, being like, Gus is playing for Spencer tomorrow, Gus is playing for Spencer tomorrow. And then, Gus turns up for Spencer and in goes wicketless. There's clips from bowling. It looks like he's bowling with good rhythm, but the opposition, Sunbury, who I think are top of the league, they have an opener, Hugh. I've got to look up how to pronounce his name. Hugh Wybgen, I think, former Aussie under-19 World Cup final making captain, who made a century. He's going very well in that competition this year. So that's an Ashes blow landed. And actually, Spencer somehow had another bowler called Gus in their 11 who takes 7 for in the game. So you've got two Gus's in the game, one of whom is an England Test cricketer who, bowled up to 90 miles an hour, and the other spinner is Gus. He's taken all the wickets. And now Gus Atkinson is not in the England team for this game, but also not in the Surrey team for their trip to Scarborough, where basically Surrey have the same fears that England do, that, you've got a guy who's just coming back from hamstring injury, not got quite enough overs under his belt, don't want to risk him for a big game that could decide, the destination of a big prize. So they've said you can go and play the twos and get some overs in there, which, is some people calling it like a club v country thing, where England want to play championship and Surrey are saying no. Seems to me like a reasonable way of going about getting some overs under your legs. That is the main thing. It's just that Gus Atkinson bowls a volume of overs ahead of the decider rather than really who those overs are against, I think.
Yeah, and also just they talked about broader cricket fitness before Archer made his return, and there were some pundits who were more concerned about his ability to stand in the field all day rather than bowl 90 miles per hour at a sustained level. And yeah, England have looked at it and been, well, Archer's just had his first test match in a while. Bryden Carter's had difficulties with his foot for a lot of this year, and Ben Stokes, you're never 100% sure how many overs he's going to be able to bowl. He bowled fewer overs at Edgbaston than he did at Headingley and Lords, for example. So you want someone who's probably a little bit more reliable in terms of being able to deliver a higher volume of overs. So that's why they've gone Woakes rather than Atkinson. And Surrey have basically gone, well, we think exactly the same for our game, which is using the Kookaburra ball. As you said, Surrey 1 point clear of Nottinghamshire at the top of the division. And you'd expect, if this round is anything like the round we've just had with the Kookaburra ball, if you're bowling a lot of overs. So actually, it might not even be the best preparation for him potentially playing next week if he ends up bowling 40 overs in a championship game at Scarborough. So interesting to see how that one goes. Bit of news from the ICC. England are going to host the next 3 World Test Championship finals. They've hosted the first 3, and their ability to draw in good crowds for neutral games has seen them signed up for 3 more.
Such a brilliant backhanded compliment, that, isn't it? Like, you're not making the finals, but at least the crowds will be good even when you don't.
Well, it'll be classic that for as many WTC finals that are held in England, the first one they do make, I'm sure, will be Ahmedabad. The bigger news, though, is that a working group is about to be set up to explore the viability of a 2-tier World Test Championship in time for the next cycle starting in fewer than 2 years' time. We talked about it on the podcast before, but this sounds like it's something that's coming closer to being a reality. The Guardian are reporting that there would be 2 tiers of 6. India and Australia want the big 3 to play their 2 5-test series that they currently play every 4 years across a 4-year cycle. They want that to happen every 3 years. England apparently are slightly more reluctant about entering that new agreement. For anything to go through, you need 8 of the 12 full member nations to vote for it. This would be totally seismic.
Yeah, no, it would be, and I think so. Obviously, that the real driving factor for the big 3 is that every 18 months playing a 5-test series against one of the other 2, or well, so yeah, as you just laid out, that's the driving factor for them. For the others, it's maybe you'd say it's harder to see why they'd vote for it. Like, even if you're currently in the top 6, you might think like, well, relegation could be pretty bad for us, or do we think a bit about the health of the game? But there's always going to be sort of backroom machinations going on here. So India promising a 5 ODI or a 3 ODI 5 T20I tour of your country in exchange for for a vote in their favour, kind of thing that can bring in a lot of money. That's the kind of thing that might be discussed sort of behind the scenes. And obviously India tour loads, and that is part of how they kind of build their power within the world game. That's how they kind of spread the wealth in some ways. So yeah, it would be massive, and I wouldn't, even though 8 out of 12 sounds like a lot when there's 3 countries that really stand to benefit, I wouldn't be surprised if this goes through, because you can see previous things that have gone through which on the face of it don't make sense. Then when you realise all the politics behind it, that can happen. Obviously, I'm not a fan of it, especially in this model. I'm not a completely anti two-tier Test cricket on the whole. Say if it were like an 8 and 4 thing that meant that you had a proper structure for the 4, who currently don't really have a proper structure, and there was a view to expanding it to the associates who do good things at World Cups and have a desire to play it. So the likes of Nepal or Scotland even to play some Test cricket, that would be a really positive thing to grow Test cricket, and 2 tiers could work in that context. 6 and 6, which is basically an excuse for the big 3 to play each other more and more and more, and potentially to also sideline some of the nations who are struggling right now. That's a really bad thing. And I guess the interesting thing will be, what does promotion relegation look like in this?
It's unclear.
Yeah,
at the moment, there's no detail on that. And if you look at the semi-recent history of Test cricket, there would have been times England that would have undoubtedly not been in the top 6 teams in the world. If you go back over the last 25 years, definitely more than a couple of occasions where that would have happened. It feels... what I don't understand is, how does this help teams 7, 8, 9, teams who have reasonable aspirations of not just being in the top tier, but at some point being among the better teams in the top tier? So if today you split Test cricket into 2 divisions of 6, one team that would definitely be in tier 2, who you might be surprised by, is Pakistan. If you look at the world rankings at the moment, there is actually a pretty clear top 6, and then a big gap between Sri Lanka in 6th and Pakistan in 7th, who are only a few points ahead of West Indies in 8th. But West Indies realistically have been outside the top 6 for the majority of the last 30 years. Pakistan would 100% be in tier 2. Fewer than 10 years ago, they went to world number 1 here. What's their path back? How is being a tier 2 nation suits them? I understand if you're the teams that are struggling for Test cricket, why this would be appealing to you. If you're a Zimbabwe who've said they want to play more Test cricket, having a structure that allows them to play more suits them. If you're Afghanistan, if you're Ireland, if they even want to play this much Test cricket. But if you're Pakistan, if you're West Indies, even Bangladesh, who've had good moments in Test cricket over the last few years, how does this benefit them at all?
Yeah, well, I mean, just taking the Pakistan thing just by itself, I mean, that is one of the... It's been a kind of undercurrent of a lot of stuff that's gone on in global cricket over the past, 12 months, more than that even, because you think back to the 2023 World Cup, of Pakistan's what they want being increasingly sidelined, and them as a team being increasingly sidelined, and also therefore increasingly struggling. Like, we think of them as this brilliant mercurial team, but actually, you think back to, what was it, the 2021 T20 World Cup, where they made the was it the final in that, and then
semi-finals in 21, final in 22.
That's right, yeah. And at that point, you looked at who was in their team, the core of sort of young players led by Babar Azam, the fact that they were seemingly growing through these tournaments, that it could be a start of like a quite positive cycle. And less than 3 years on, it's a shambles really on and off the pitch. They lost against Bangladesh in the first T20, and the new coach, who's their millionth coach in the last few years, Mike Hesson, says the pitch isn't good enough. Obviously, the pitch in Pakistan are always a massive topic for debate. Who is actually in that team now? Like Shaheen, Naseem, Babar, Rizwan, even Shadab, these guys who should have been, kind of
the long-term core across all formats. Exactly.
Having to fight for their places, or there's politics going on which are keeping them out. And then, but also then financially off the field, they put in these massive expense into the Champions Trophy, which they say has turned a profit, but I'm not sure. And then there's this report saying that there's been financial sort of accounting irregularities in Pakistan cricket as well. And then you wonder how they're ever going to host a global tournament again, given the situation between them and India, and so they can't get a cash injection way.
This week there was a Legend game that was supposed to be held between Pakistan and India that didn't even happen. So
exactly.
The idea of that happening, well, we know it doesn't really happen outside major tournaments anyway. But yeah, for every other country, that's a cash injection that Pakistan are never going to get.
Yeah, and yes, so the cash injection of India, Tour and Balatri, that's not a thing that is available to them. The PSL, obviously this year it gets squeezed because of the Champions Trophy, which is hosted in Pakistan, but that means that's played alongside the IPL, loses a bit of relevance because of that as well. And so you can, and the thing is you wonder how much is this happening because of sort of negligence, and how much is it kind of India, we talk about, exerting the soft power of going to play somewhere, and then that brings in money to that country. Is this a sort of the soft power the other way, where you're not saying we're excluding Pakistan, we're banning them from international cricket, whatever, but you are saying, actually, we're going to kind of like squeeze you in other ways, and we're gonna at best we're gonna hope people see we don't really mind whether it thrives or not, but actually it's almost like an active thing that we're doing, because that is going to be the consequence for the other teams, for West Indies, for Bangladesh. I don't know. I think that like a two-tier system, if again in an 8 and 4 2-tier system, you might see those two teams dropping to second tier at times, rising back up, maybe pushing up into the top 6 at times. I think that they might not mind too much, perhaps. I don't know, but for Pakistan, there is a real worry there that we might lose one of the great colourful teams of world cricket when they're at their best, because they haven't been for a long time, and there are reasons on and off the field for that.
But even if you look at West Indies in 8th, the last time they toured Australia, they won a test match. The last time Bangladesh in 9th, the last time that they hosted Australia, world number 1 team in the world, they drew that series. I look at South Africa, who just won the World Test Championship final, who are currently 2nd in the world rankings. There would have been times pretty recently where they would have flirted with being outside that top 6. Sri Lanka have definitely spent time outside the top 6. New Zealand's success over the last 10, 15 years is an anomaly in terms of their history. There's no guarantee that they won't find a reasonable stretch of time outside that top 6. So unless there's real clear mechanisms for promotion and relegation that teams are happy with, I don't understand how this works, because teams are going to get an enormous financial hit under the current way things work in terms of how you get money from hosting series, especially against the big teams. I don't understand how this becomes viable. And I don't really think it's a necessarily better product. I think England, Pakistan, last time England played Pakistan in a test series, Pakistan won 2-1. Are we really saying we want to get rid of these series? I don't really see how it makes for a better product.
Yeah, because obviously the big three want to play against each other because they make money and because it creates entertaining spectacles and stuff. But the other way to go about it is to build up the other teams in world cricket so that you can have good spectacles against them as well. After South Africa won the World Championship final, there are these rumblings that, maybe we'll invite South Africa a 5-test series at some point, because it turns out they're really good and that could be a really good thing. Well, if instead of just thinking like, well, how do we just squeeze as much money out of the cricket that is good at the moment, and just kind of forget about the rest, you actually try and come up with a structure that allows all teams to develop and to have enough money to develop and that kind of thing, then actually in the long run you will have loads of teams that you can play a compelling contest against, and the whole of cricket will be better for that. But that is just not the view that administrators ever take, because they just because they just can't see past the next paycheck, and and they would rather have, I guess, the bigger cut of the smaller pie. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Like, Pakistan, there was that amazing test series in 2016, could easily have been a 5-test series. Now a 5-test series might be a bit of a blowout, but if you had not guaranteed with that as well, but if you were to say we want to support this team to get back to being really good, and then we'll host them, and then it will be a fantastic spectacle, and that will draw public interest, because the public interest I think will dwindle if it is just the same teams playing the same every 2 years basically. And also in the off year, because you still can't play them all the time, if that cricket is less good, you will lose out for public enjoy. Like, you want to fight every summer for a slice of the public attention, and I think that, to be honest, 5-test series are like still the best way to do that. Really, you're not going to grab the public interest with a 3-test series really, or with an ODI series really.
Well, I think a major issue that we've got at the moment is that we are already in a much worse position than we were a decade ago. So if you use a starting point, is how many teams do countries like England and India and Australia view hosting a 5-test series as being viable? So go back to 2016, the idea of having a 5-test series against Pakistan would have been a great one. Just had a brilliant series, they're number 1 in the world, really, really competitive. That's not where Pakistan currently are in overseas conditions. The other thing is that we have less of a structure. Weirdly, actually, this has happened more in the World Test Championship era, where you think there'd be more structure of when teams tour. If you're using England as an example, it used to be pretty much everyone was on a 4-year cycle. Every 4 years, one of the top 8 nations would come. Occasionally you get Bangladesh, Zimbabwe, although they haven't really toured in the last 20 years. What has happened recently is we've had massive gaps between the mid-table countries touring. So Pakistan haven't toured since the COVID year in 2020 in Test cricket. Sri Lanka went 8 years without touring between 2016 and 2024. And South Africa haven't toured anywhere near as much as they used to in the first 15 years of the decade, of the century rather. And it means that for casual fans, you don't know who the players are as much. You had Dhananjaya De Silva captaining Sri Lanka, having played 60 Test matches last year. It's his first tour of England. I think once we've got into this position where the casual cricket watchers don't know who the players are as much, then there's less interest there as well. So I think it all is linked to each other. We'll leave it there for now, but we will definitely come back to this topic in the months ahead. Before we continue, Wisden have collaborated with the Hertfordshire-based brewery Mad Squirrel to revive the Wisden beer range, featuring the Little Wonder, the nickname of John Wisden himself, which is a 4.7% pale ale bursting with tropical fruit, layered with aromatic herbs and anchored by a bold, weighty bitterness. The second beer in this short but sweet lineup is the Afternoon Session, which, as the name suggests, is the perfect choice for an easygoing cricketing afternoon. This 3.8% gluten-free pale ale is light, fruity and effortlessly drinkable. I did some extensive research myself last night, sampling our offerings, and I can report back to you that, yeah, very good stuff. You can head to the Mad Squirrel website to create your custom packs of 6, 12 or 24 beers with free next day delivery. Find the link in the description below and trust us, you will not be disappointed. Next up, Ben, more structural change. The players in England have come out in favour of a reduced schedule for 2026, advocating for a reduction in county championship games from 14 a year to 12 and a reduction in the number of Blast group games from 14 a year to 12. 83% of players surveyed by the PCA, the Professional Cricketers Association, have cited physical concerns over their workload, while 67% would describe the fixture list as being detrimental to their mental health. There's concern over player welfare and recovery time between matches. The 12-game championship season has been described as the only reasonable option by the PCA chair, Ollie Hannon-Dolby. Some counties have come out saying that they do want a 14-game season in the championship. Surrey, Somerset, Middlesex and Yorkshire. Meanwhile, Durham and Lancashire have come out to bat for a 12-game season. Is what the players are asking for better welfare and recovery time mutually exclusive with a 14-game championship season?
Well, there is the feeling in the back of I can see in county fans' heads when you look at, firstly, some players who say are earning lots of money in franchise cricket and then are coming to county cricket and saying like they're very tired, and also what you mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, wanting to earn the same for less work. I think we should take what they're saying genuinely. I think that we don't.
There are some specific case studies that are totally ridiculous.
Exactly. Yeah. I think so. The tricky thing is that there is just so much at play here. So if we can just take some things sort of almost case by case, say one of the big concerns they have is the back-to-back games and the Blast. These crazy turnarounds where you might have an evening game and then a day game the next day, and you're getting home at 3 and you're into the ground at 10 a.m. That kind of thing, which does happen. And even if that only is happening to like some teams once or twice a season, that is still too often, and that is something that will really, stick with a player that game they turn up for.
You spoke to Daniel Bell-Drummond at Kent at the start of last season, and he was describing it as being genuinely dangerous when you're facing Tamar Mills, who's bowling 90 miles per hour under lights when you're sleep deprived.
Yeah, basically, yeah. And when you hear players talk about that, you realise, okay, no, this is a genuine issue. But then taking that as a thing in particular, and this is one of the interesting things, is how the counties are actually kind of set against their players in some aspects here, is that actually the big reason for the back-to-back Blast games is because almost every Blast game is played between Thursday and Sunday each week. I think I looked at this. There was 17 out of the 126 were Monday to Wednesday this week, and only 3 of those, so 3 of those on a Tuesday, none on a Monday, 14 on a Wednesday. So that's basically all the games in half the week. And that is because that's when counties think you sell more tickets, and that's why you get these back-to-back Blast games. If you spread them out across a week a bit more, you would be able to have fewer, maybe even none of those games. But that's not what counties want, even though it's what players want. So I think there is probably an Alan Fordham who I think does the scheduling. He has an impossible job, but I think there are some little tweaks you could do. I guess one of the other bits of workload that I guess if you think about with the county championship, when would you cut off those games? Are you just cutting them off the start of the season, or are you cutting them off maybe a rest week? Each team gets one more rest week in the first block of games or something? Because sometimes you look at that first block of games, and one example I always think of is Matt Potts in 2022 when he bowls himself into the England Test team, playing every single game for Durham, basically taking 6 wickets every time he bowls, then bowls brilliantly through the New Zealand Test series, and then rocks up the India game, and it's like, this guy's not as good as he was when he first played the first season. It's like, yeah, because he's played essentially 11 Test matches in a row, so he's going to be pretty tired. So I get that as well. And I think that when it comes to fast bowling in particular, that's where the workload can look a bit tricky over a season.
But if you shave off 2 games, let's say one at the start of the season, one at the end of the season, so he plays 10 in a row. That's not great either.
That's the thing, is that, like, are there other ways to manage the workload for the players who are most in demand, but to keep the amount of cricket broadly the same? Because the amount of cricket actually, in a historical sense, hasn't increased. That players aren't playing, they're not bowling more overs than they were 30 years ago, and they're not playing more days of cricket than they were. It's just the schedule itself isn't quite working. So, I mean, it sounds like we are going to have a reduction of one of the 2 competitions, and it will just basically come down to the battle lines are basically being drawn.
I think it sounds like it's going to be both. It sounds like Blast, everyone is on the same page, pretty much.
I thought that there was some suggestion from some counties that you can cut the county championship and then keep the Blast the same. But yeah, it might well be that we get both, or that it's just the Blast, I think. And again, just losing 2 Blast games, I guess, does that solve everything?
But
No.
This is what I mean. I think it's quite a confused discussion because there are lots of different things going on. So player welfare, you need to immediately eradicate the genuinely dangerous turnaround time. Lancashire have been vocal, and rightly so, about one game in particular where I think they were getting home at something like 3 or 4 in the morning and had a game the next day. That is actually dangerous. You don't want players driving when they're that tired, which happens a lot. So there's that. You also have what's a good product. And I think the championship at the moment is actually doing pretty well. Especially at the start and end of the season, there's a lot of eyeballs on it. There's genuine interest. It takes up column inches. People are talking about it on different podcasts. It feels like it gets a good chunk of the overall English cricket summer attention-wise. The Blast, I think, and we'll get onto it in a bit, I think the Blast is in a really, really bad way at the moment. And I think some of the stuff that has been said by players in counties, I think it's been a bit naive about the Blast. They say the Blast, with a bit of a reboost, will be revitalised, etc. Shaving off 2 games is going to do nothing. We're going to get to the end of the group stage and how little interest there was when there was a lot of good cricket going on. But I think taking off 2 games won't really achieve anything. And I think you've got to think about what fans want a bit more. So a few years ago, really not very long ago, you had 16 county championship games. This is a 25% reduction in less than a decade. It rains in England. You're going to lose games to the weather. I get the points around fast bowlers and looking after them more. But at the moment, squads are increasingly built around the idea of having this number of games. I think actually one of the potential consequences of having fewer games is fewer professional cricketers, because you just don't need as many players in the squads. So I really, really don't like a reduction in the Blast in the championship, and we're going to get to exactly what one of the suggestions is in a second that has, in my opinion, a weird amount of support. And then I don't think shaving 2 games off does anything to revive the Blast, which, as we have seen this summer, I don't think it's an exaggeration to say it's a dying competition. Interest is down. Crowd numbers are down basically across the country, and it's given no hope of life with this confused fixture list that takes place in the background of the busiest time of the England international summer. And yeah, we'll get to the Blast in a second, but do you want to just explain this conference system idea that's being mooted? Because I think this is unnecessarily confusing the championship, because I think the championship's pretty good at the moment.
Yeah, so I'll give it a go. So it's for a top tier of 12 teams that split into 2 conferences of 6, and then a bottom tier of 6 teams. So in the top tier, each team plays each team in its conference twice, and then one team, and then 2 teams from the other conference, 1 home, 1 away, and then you get a grand final at the end of that. So everyone in the top tier is playing 12 games, 2 of them are playing 13 games. And then the bottom tier, I guess you have everyone playing everyone else twice. So actually that's only 10 games. And then maybe there's a promotion and relegation game possibly, but it sounds like possibly not. So actually for the bottom teams, there'd be even possibly more of a reduction. Yeah, it's
viewed as being popular because more teams, first of all, it's got the reduction of games, but also that more teams can start the season with a chance of winning it.
Sure.
So 12 teams can win the championship rather than the current 10.
Yeah, and I guess...
Or actually, Surrey, Somerset are advocating for an 8-team Division 1, which I actually think is quite interesting because those are the 2 historically most successful teams. If you look at Somerset, the team that's been in Division 1 the longest, Surrey won 3 in a row, 2 with very different models of how to run a club. They want a smaller Division 1 where they think the most important thing is you play everyone home and away. They're sort of looking at that as an integrity of the competition point of view. What gives you the best Division 1? And I don't think everyone else is thinking about that. They're thinking about what's the easiest way for us to potentially win the competition.
Yeah, and you do have this issue sometimes with Division 2 where you get teams that just kind of stagnate at the bottom of it. So that would be an advantage of a 6-team competition down there, because you're not going to have that many teams who are never. Well, you're not going to have teams who are never in contention for promotion, because you only need to win a couple games for that to be the case. I mean, not many people have taken on board what I think would be the best way to do it, which is the Scottish football style. You split the competition, you split the divisions in half through the season. So you have 2 tiers of 9. Everyone plays everyone. Halfway through, you then split that. The top 5 play each other again once, so those teams play 12 games. The bottom teams play each other once, so those teams play 11 games. Then you get some playoffs if you like to round it up. But that for me makes a bit more sense as a way to go about it. But still, I think 14 for me. And then but as you say, the Blast is just a mess, and people aren't looking at it saying like, what is going to be the best Blast we can have, and just
I mean, just finally in the championship, I'd say that it would be a real big shame if the best teams aren't playing each other. If you have 2 teams that 2 of the best teams in the country in different conferences, they will in some seasons, if they don't win it, not face each other. And I think that's a big shame. I think one of the strengths of the championship now is, and I think it helps with stuff like following who's in the reckoning for England, because you can say with a lot of confidence that the best players in the country are the players who are doing really well in Division 1, and you lose that a little bit. I know we had that in the COVID years, and I think the conference structure had a fair bit of support initially among fans, but I don't think overall it was as good a product. And I actually do worry that bottom 6 loses a bit of, I don't know, meaning, and you'll know that it's the bottom 6. There's something different. I think I'd worry about it from a quality point of view, and I'd also. You were talking about this before we started recording. Gloucestershire released a statement today, essentially publicly saying how worried they are for the number of players they're losing this season. And I think that sort of situation will just become more exaggerated if you have a clear bottom 6. If you're a player with England aspirations, you're not going to want to play for a team that's been in the bottom 6 for a few years, I think. Anyway, on to the Blast. The 4 quarterfinals that we played in September are Surrey versus Northants, Durham, Hampshire, Lancashire versus Kent, and Somerset versus Birmingham. Couple of fun performances of note in the last week. 17-year-old Farhan Ahmed took a hat-trick in his fifer against Lancs, and Jordan Cox hit a remarkable 139 not out as Essex chased down 222. But to illustrate our point, Ben, the South group had an amazing finish, and basically no one saw it.
Yeah, so this was Surrey. Well, it involved 3 teams, right? It involved Surrey and Sussex, and then also Kent, who were sort of nervously, they were on the transistor radios, weren't they?
Yeah.
Down at Canterbury. So Sussex needed to beat Surrey basically to overtake Kent on net run rate, and it looked like they were going to do it. They were chasing, and then Surrey's international quality, I guess, shows through. Sam Curran bowled brilliant over at the end. Was it 8 runs conceded
and 2 wickets,
2 wickets taken,
when
which couldn't derail the
Sussex
chase?
needed 20 off their last 2 wins with 6 wickets remaining.
Yeah, and so that lost the game from a very, very winnable position. And yeah, there's videos of the Kent team sort of following it from the ground and celebrating having made it into the quarterfinals. So that is great, but it was also doesn't get the cut through that should get, really, as because there are still good cricketers and good cricket in this competition, and for all that we've talked about its issues, the issue is just the format that you can't follow it, really. And actually, sorry to go back to the previous point, but I actually think the Thursday to Sunday structure is a detriment here as well, because it's such a massive games in that 4-day period. Like, there is just so much going on. Like, actually, could you have a thing where you have Tuesday 1 week, Tuesday, Thursday and Saturday are your North Group games, Wednesday, Friday and Sunday are South Group games, and the next week it switches. Could that be a way that you can have a competition that you can just follow quite easily? Maybe, I don't know. But I think that trying to, the other thing that's relevant here actually is the 100 money, which we haven't really mentioned, and that should give counties the leeway and the breathing space to think about medium-term and long-term health rather than having to be about short-term finances. And so that's why I think there's the cut to 12 blast games is being just basically accepted. Before, they couldn't accept that because you needed those 7 home games to basically stay afloat, and even some teams were basically not staying afloat even with that. Now they can be like, okay, we can cut those, that's fine, we don't need those to stay afloat. But they're not now thinking like, well, then what does a good blast, like the blast has before now just been the lifeblood of county finances, and that's kind of all it's been, rather than being seen as the tool to kind of get people into the game. But actually, if you live in Leicester, say, that is your that's the best cricket you can kind of, the most entry-level cricket you can see all summer is going to be a blast game that the Fox is playing. There's going to be England players involved and international players involved. It could be a really good thing still, even with the 100 as the dominant T20 competition of the summer, but it's just not being viewed in that at all. And the 100 money should allow counties to look at it a bit more holistically, but it doesn't quite think that that's
completely agree. It just looks quite unimaginative to me, and it doesn't solve. It solves the issue that the players are talking about, and that's fair enough. But I don't think it even scratches the surface of how to make the blast a competition that is followed, even at the level it was followed in 2018, 2019, pre-100 and pre-COVID. Finally, Ben, very excitingly, you're going to be wearing something special on next week's podcast.
Well, keen listeners of last week's show will know that it was dominated by a discussion of David Gower's eBay auction when he was, there were loads of things that were going on. I think we all had a look and maybe put a bid in or two on a couple things.
I didn't, and I regret it.
Okay. Well, so what happened with me is that because you see things and there's one bid on them, they've put a reserve price down of 100, there's one bid on 100, like, well, surely someone's put in a maximum bid that's like 150 or something, and I'm curious to see what's going on there. So I put in a bid of 104, I think, on a David Gower, on the David Gower sleeveless Leicestershire red stripe sponsored top, so that he's worn. And it was, a day and 2 hours left to go before the auction closed. 104, highest bidder. I was like, great. Keep following, but like, hang on, it's getting closer and closer to the deadline, and no one's come in. And then it's, oh, you're the winner, so great. So,
amazing.
And I'm pretty happy with that. It's a chunk of money, but it's a once in a lifetime opportunity to own something like that, and it will get a lot of use on the podcast. Yeah, I didn't win the 1 day jumper, which was a thing of beauty. Didn't win that. Phil didn't win the hold all as well. The Benson Hedges holder, he was outbid on that. But we've got one item that we've won.
Phil's empty-handed.
He's empty-handed. Yeah,
no.
I'm the only Gower owning Wisden pod member.
How warm is it?
It's not arrived yet. Otherwise, I'd be wearing it right now.
Okay.
It should arrive tomorrow. Well, yeah, warm enough to help in this air-conditioned fridge of a studio. Yes.
Yeah. I just don't believe the thermostat. There's no way it's 21 degrees. Anyway, that is everything for today's show. Cheers, Ben. This summer, Kia wants to help you and your family get close to the action and create inspiring memories that will last a lifetime. On September 20th, they are giving back to young cricket fans and offering 11 to 14-year-olds the chance to train at the Kia Oval with top coaches from Surrey before playing a tournament on the pitch itself to show off everything that they've learned. If you are 11 to 14 or your child is 11 to 14 and would like to have this experience of a lifetime, all you need to do is enter via the link in the description.